Because I'll plant you, boy. Now get the off the cart.
Walter.
Walter?
Walter?
Oh, here we go.
You see that?
Golf, that beautiful game where people pay money to become visibly upset and frustrated. It can be a lot of fun, of course, when you gather with your friends to exchange alibis about what you shot on each hole as you enjoy some fresh air and perhaps a rising blood alcohol curve. But sometimes it can look something more like this.
Took her ball.
Bro, you took her ball.
Dude, I'm not gonna fight you over
You need money for her golf balls.
I'm going to, Walter. Because I'll plant you, boy. Now get the off the cart.
Walter.
Walter?
Walter?
Oh, here we go.
You see that?
Oh.
That's what you spend to heaven. You want to test God? You come get it. Stack.
Okay, he's mentally ill.
Oh.
Let's move
You
along.
think I'm mentally ill?
I know you're
Been to heaven.
So question, if this happened and you're sitting in the cart, can you use force against this guy? Is he a deadly threat or is he any threat? Buckle up, grab your 9-iron. We're going golfing today. Let's get into it. Okay, so if you're like me and I had to crank this up to max volume to understand it, I'll save you that. I'm just gonna give you what he said. Quote, I'll plant you, bitch boy. Now get the off the cart. You see that? That's a dude that's been to heaven. And you want to test God? You come get it, stack. End quote. I mean, it's weird. I'll give the guy that. And original, I've never heard that before. This guy obviously seems to struggle with reality in so many ways, but let's face it, plenty of people who do struggle with reality are capable of tremendous violence. And maybe that includes this guy too. So here's the question. So at that moment right here, is what he's saying enough to create an actual threat against you such that you can use force? Let's talk this through. Now, let's start by remembering the general rule that we can only use force to defend ourselves. Yeah, there are some places where that's not exactly the way that it goes, but we're taking a broad aim at this right now, so we're gonna use that as where the needle starts. We can only use force to stop force, okay? Now, force is divided, of course, into two different categories, deadly and non-deadly force. Deadly force is generally defined as force that can foreseeably cause death or great bodily harm, like seriously injuring or maiming someone. Non-deadly force is simply the force that basically falls short of being deadly. Now, from what we see in the video, beyond the farmer's tan and crazy eye, he does not appear to be armed with anything beyond an inadequate comprehension of how pathetic this all looks. But remember, words can rise to the level of creating a threat that sometimes we can use force against. Sometimes we need to use force against. Is this one of those times? And is his speech protected as being free speech? So let's take that second question first. So the U.S. Supreme Court in 2023, in the case of Counterman v. Colorado, adopted the rule that speech is not protected if the speaker consciously disregarded a substantial risk that his communications would be viewed as threatening violence. Now, previously, the U.S. Supreme Court also defined true threats in the case of Virginia v. Black, which was a 2003 case, as, quote, statements where the speaker means to communicate a serious expression of an intent to commit an act of unlawful violence to a particular individual or a group of individuals, end quote. So this little speech, this rant that the golfer is sharing with the world is definitely not protected by the First Amendment. I think we can conclusively say that. But does it rise to a level of giving the other golfers enough of a threat to respond with their own physical force? Do his words create some kind of imminent threat of harm? Now, a verbal threat can be enough to constitute an imminent threat of harm, but threatening words without a threat of physical violence are usually, not always, but usually insufficient to justify the use of force. So when the crazy golfer says, quote, I'll plant you, boy, end quote, I'm not exactly sure what this means, by the way, but I doubt that it has anything to do with let's go work at the community garden together. I've got some cool tricks to show you. I'm guessing that more like given the context and the tone of the sounds of what this guy is saying, this is probably something he once trotted out once at like the trailer park when Randy, who's been recently promoted to the assistant park supervisor, by the way, told him that he owed site fees and our boy didn't feel like paying him. So let's definitely chalk up the I'll plant you boy to being a threat of physical violence. But it goes on, and there's qualifiers here. Quote, Now get the off the cart, end quote. Here the gentleman is establishing a bright line of do this, then that, or if this, then that. If you get off the cart, then we can fight. Now in our case, the then that is going to get weird, and we'll get to that in a moment of what happens if you get off the cart. But if I were a prosecutor assigned the case and someone, my supervisor said, or I was being forced somehow to basically prosecute someone who decided to go full Scotty Cameron on this guy, I would be arguing that our green shirt or golfer did not initiate the violence and actually set a rule of, look, if you don't get off the cart, there's going to be no violence. Now, again, that's obviously crazy, but the point here is that this guy didn't start accosting the people in the cart. He didn't go up to them and say, I'm going to do this to you, I'm going to do that to you, or I'm going to grab my 9-iron, then I'm going to attack you or something like that. Rather, he's standing here seemingly unarmed, and he's saying, look, if you get out of the cart, there's going to be violence. Now, that's a subtle but legally significant distinction. And no, I'm not suggesting that this is fair, that this guy can go off and shoot his mouth off. Yes, it is crazy, but that's exactly the sort of thing that a prosecutor is going to be seizing hold of to put you behind bars if you, again, go full Scotty Cameron on this guy. So this guy goes on with his next phrase, quote, you see that? That's a dude that's been to heaven, and you want to test God? You come get it, stack, end quote. A dude that's been to heaven. You want to test God. I mean, this is golden material. I'm definitely going to be busting that out on my toddler sons the next time they give me any kind of grief about eating their vegetables. There's really, I mean, it's weird. I'm not sure that communicates a specific threat other than maybe virtue signaling his mental health condition. But I'm not really sure I see that as being entirely legally significant. It's pump up language, but it's not a I'm going to do something to you language. And again, there's a key distinguishing factor there. So he goes on, quote, you come get it, stack, end quote. So again, this is just like before where we set up the bright line, if this, then that condition of, look, if you get out of the cart, something bad will happen. Here it's a, if you come and get it, something will happen. There's that implied, if not explicit, threat. But once more, we have to distinguish between you do this, then I will come get you is different than I'm going to grab my Vokey and start dropping it on you or something like that. I don't know. I'm sorry, Titleist. I don't mean to pick on you, but it's just what keeps coming to mind as I'm just kind of riffing here. Hopefully you can see the difference between those two of I'm going to do something to you unless you either escape, if possible, or do something to me first to interfere with that plan, versus I'm not going to do anything unless you do this first. Get out of your golf cart or come over here. These are two very different things, and believe me, these are the exact sort of things that the prosecutor, again, is going to be hanging you for. So you have to be extraordinarily careful about this. This is not the time to get out there and to practice your flop shot on this guy's shin. It's not going to work out for you in court. Just promise you on that one. So for those of you who are regular viewers, you know that this is not exactly the sort of thing that we cover, but this was just too juicy to not share with you down the lens. Let me know if you got something out of this. Click the like button. And of course, I really look forward to reading the comments in this one as well. Here's the bottom line and some of my final thoughts on this. If you do use force and find yourself in court, you will need to be able to show why you reasonably believed that you had to use that force. That's it. In a nutshell. Now, a big issue here is going to be a concept of preclusion. That means that you're going to need to be able to show why you could not just back up the golf cart, drive off, or drive off forward, or whatever else the case may be. You're going to have to be facing those sorts of questions and issues because that's going to be question number one for the prosecutor. Also, as a note, standard ground is not really going to be an issue here, I think, because again, this guy has not initiated force. He's initiated some weird threats, but not necessarily force. It doesn't rise to the level of being that immediate threat you have to respond to, I think, in most cases. And I think that as a result, it's going to be a tough sell to most juries. And my suggestion is always, if you can avoid the use of force, avoid it. Every single client that my firm's represented in real life, and we have a handful at any point in time, defensive gun uses and defensive use of force cases, every single time, regardless of the outcome of the case, we're talking charges dismissed, you name it, they always turn and say, you know what? If I could have avoided this, if I could go back, I would. So heed that advice. If you can just throw that golf cart in neutral, roll it back down the hill or throw it in reverse, wherever the case may be, and get the heck out of there safely, do it. Which brings us to our quote of the day. This one comes from Cicero, from, of course, ancient Rome. Quote, any man can make mistakes, but only an idiot persists in his error. I'm going to think twice before I put on a green golf shirt next time. Thanks very much, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this one, please feel free to check out some of our other great content, and we'll see you in the next one.